So in my last video, I discussed how I came to see my belief system as built on 3 conversations. This was critical for me because it gave me the framework and blueprint for a full-blown faith re-examination and renovation. This was to be a journey where I would walk up from the deepest foundations of my belief system to see if it all was still in working order, or if certain parts need to be updated or strengthened. Because as any builder knows, a crack in the foundation will affect everything else. I often think of the imagery of the renovations of the Salt Lake Temple. Those renovations have had to go down to the literal bedrock upon which the building stood in order to ensure that it could withstand the earthquakes we predict will come. So what is this bedrock in the context of testimony? It's what I call level 1 conversations. These are conversations and questions about the very nature of reality itself, including the nature of belief itself. As part of this renovation, I went down far deeper than the typical rabbit hole of anti-Mormon literature. I began to explore the nature of human belief itself. I began to explore the question for why a person should believe in a higher power at all. I began to explore if the natural world held any evidence of intelligent design. I began to explore the best arguments available on these topics, and these extended far beyond the materials of the church. I could not possibly go through all the people that I read and listened to when I was exploring this kind of first level of conversation. But some of the most influential were the atheist versus Christian debates from people like William Lane Craig, John Lennox, and Frank Turek, Christian philosophers like Alvin Plantinga and Greg Bahnsen, scientists like Stephen Meyer and William Dembski, historical luminaries who pondered level 1 questions, people like Blaise Pascal, Thomas Aquinas, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, and more recently, a renowned psychologist and philosopher named Jordan Peterson, who atheists are calling the gateway drug to religion. If you are unfamiliar with the Jordan Peterson phenomena, you need to look into it. He is the most powerful current voice in the level 1 conversation. He is showing that belief in a higher power is all but unavoidable when carefully thought about. Jordan Peterson, using the language of secular society, is reviving the level 1 conversation in fascinating ways as he explores the nature of fundamental reality and how the idea of God relates to it.
Religious is what you act out.
Anything you act out.
Everything you act out is predicated on your implicit axioms. And the system of implicit axioms that you hold as primary is your religious belief system. It doesn't matter whether you're an atheist or not. That's just surface noise.
So it has nothing to do with divinity or
No, I didn't
supernatural
say that.
beings?
No.
Or it doesn't necessarily have to do with those?
No, it probably necessarily has to do with it too, but it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with your voluntarily articulated statements about whether or not you believe in something like a transcendent deity. So, I mean, what you act out is much more what you are than what you say about yourself. And what the hell do you know about what you believe anyways? You're complicated, man.
It's a fair question.
Well, seriously, people are complicated. You know, like we're not transparent to ourselves at all. That's why we have to go to university and study psychology. It's like, you know, we're not exactly black boxes, but we are the most complicated things there are. Right? And we can't even program our VCR clocks. So it's like, how the hell can we propose to understand ourselves? And, you know, I'm existentially oriented, which is to say that I think that what you hold to be true is best determined as a consequence of an analysis of your actions rather than as a consequence of an analysis of what you purport to believe.
Now, I could go on and on with the people that have profoundly influenced my view as I went through this first level of my faith renovations. However, I don't have time for that, so I'll provide a more complete list in a later video or blog. Needless to say, my exploration at this level has been one of the most fulfilling and fascinating experiences of my life, and has led me to believe that among the possible explanations for reality, a personal God is the best explanation. And therefore, it is perfectly rational to believe in some notion of God. So what next? Who or what is this God? This is the level 2 conversation. As I pondered that question, I came to realize that a God who does not interact with the universe in any meaningful way may as well not exist.
A God who makes no demands is the functional equivalent of a God who does not exist. A world without God, the living God, who establishes moral laws to govern and perfect his children, is also a world without ultimate truth or justice.
So I realized I should look for a God who interacts with the world, a God whose existence actually matters. People throughout all of human history have claimed to have interacted with God. I realized that perhaps it was worthwhile to explore the different explanations of God given by mankind throughout history. However, in examining Islam, Hinduism, various pagan sects, vague spirituality, etc., it was hard for any of those to hold a candle to the story of Jesus. No matter how you cut the story of Jesus, whether that's historical, sociological, philosophical, psychological, that story, the story of Jesus, is stunning. It's a story that transformed the world. Interestingly, it was an atheist who helped me to realize this. Tom Holland, no, not that Tom Holland, but the historian, recently wrote a book called Dominion about the impact of Jesus and how his ideas have shaped the world for the better.
Cicero's great contemporary Caesar is, by some accounts, slaughtering 1 million Gauls and enslaving another million in the cause of boosting his political career. And far from feeling in any way embarrassed about this, he's kind of promoting it. And so when he holds his triumph, people are going through the streets of Rome carrying billboards, boasting about how many people he's killed. And this is a really terrifyingly alien world. And the more you look at it, the more you realize that it is built on systematic exploitation. Mm-hmm. So the entire economy is founded on slave labor.
Right.
The sexual economy is founded on the absolute right of free Roman males to have sex with anyone that they want, any way that they like. And in almost every way, this is a world that is unspeakably cruel to our way of thinking. And I began to realize that actually, in almost every way, I am Christian. And I began to realize that actually Paul, although in many ways he seems a much less familiar figure than Cicero, the kind of urbane man with his property problems. Paul never had any property; he just made tents. Yes. That in almost every what is it, seven, that is the 7 letters that are people conventionally people absolutely accept that, and as Tom Wright was saying, this is not a very lengthy amount of writing, but compacted into this very, very small amount of writing was almost everything that explains the modern world.
Well, the Western world, as we take for granted. Yes,
but also the way that the West has then moved on to shape concepts like international law, for instance. So the fact, concepts of human rights, all these kind of things, ultimately, they don't go back to Greek philosophers. They don't go back to Roman imperialism. They go back to Paul.
Some of the humanists
Paul really
and atheists,
his letters, I think, are, along with the 4 Gospels, the most influential, the most impactful, the most revolutionary writings that have emerged from the ancient world.
When I came to understand more deeply the Jesus story and asked if God was in this, I could not help but conclude that if there is a God, this Jesus from the New Testament must have had something to do with him. So I began to read the great Christian writers who explain in depth who this Jesus was and what his ideas were, independent of any particular denomination. Writers like C.S. Lewis, G.K. Chesterton, and George MacDonald blew me away. I will always remember one particular quote from C.S. Lewis as I explored the Level 2 conversation. He said, "I am trying to prevent anyone saying the really foolish thing that people often say about him. I'm ready to accept Jesus as a great moral teacher, but I don't accept his claim to be God." That is one thing we must not say. A man who was merely a man and said the sort of things Jesus said would not be a great moral teacher. He would either be a lunatic on the level of a man who says he is a poached egg, or else he would be the devil of hell. You must make your choice. Either this man was and is the Son of God, or else a madman, or something worse. You can shut him up for a fool. You can spit at him and kill him as a demon. Or you can fall at his feet and call him Lord and God. But let us not come with any patronizing nonsense about his being a great human teacher. He has not left that open to us. He did not intend to. And so now I found myself, independent of any claims by Joseph Smith, a believer not only in some vague notion of God, but a believer in Jesus Christ as the manifestation of that God in the world. So now, even if Joseph was a fraud, I would still have faith in the Christ of the New Testament. I can't stress enough how important this was. I can't stress enough the need to come to know God and Jesus Christ as the foundation of your faith. This foundation makes the whole story of the restoration shine. And so now, it was time for the third conversation, the final level of my renovation, the level that most people never go beneath. This is the conversation the church has been having since 1830. It's about what happens if indeed Jesus Christ is the Savior of the New Testament, and the New Testament is fundamentally true. Do you see how the Joseph Smith story suddenly becomes plausible? Do you see how now the issues like the Book of Mormon anachronisms, which are still bothersome, seem like small cracks in the paint of a solid building? Do you see how belief in God and Jesus Christ acts as the core of the shelf that so many people say are breaking? But here is the great thing. There is a great conversation to be had at level 3 that provides real, substantial evidence and reasons to believe. Have you read all the works of Hugh Nibley? Have you read the deathbed testimonies of the 3 witnesses to the Book of Mormon? Are you aware of the 14 other witnesses to the plates? Are you familiar with the discovery of the land Bountiful and Nahum in the Near East? Are you familiar with the intense complexity of the Book of Mormon? Are you familiar with the remarkable theology and answers to Christian questions that came from Joseph Smith? Are you familiar with the broad social science literature that shows that the more faithful a saint is, the more they thrive in almost every aspect of human flourishing: education, relationships, health, volunteering, finances, etc.? Look, Joseph was either a fraud or he was fundamentally telling the truth. But do you see how the answer to that question becomes totally different when you are at level 3 on the foundation of level 1 and 2? With this foundation in place, you are seeking the church and priesthood keys promised by the Jesus of the New Testament rather than approaching Joseph's story as a skeptical atheist. The problem is that we have forgotten that the story of Joseph Smith is built on the foundation of the conclusions reached in conversation 1 and 2. In my own journey, I came to realize that for the past 60 years, secularism has been pouring acid on the foundations of belief in Western society. Saints who live in the West need to go back to the foundations and re-examine them for damage, especially if they find themselves struggling. We have to ask ourselves if we have adopted a secular lens through which we view the world. What is the proper lens through which we should see the world? These are the fundamental issues, and it is at these fundamental levels that problems usually arise from. Throwing paint over and over on a wall that is built on a cracked foundation does not fix the problem. And we should not assume that cracks in the walls of people's testimonies just need some paint. When someone says they can't accept the Book of Mormon, you will likely find that they don't accept the Bible either, or even have meaningful reasons for their belief in God. So why didn't I have a faith crisis? Because by a twist of fate, I was directed to go deeper, to go to the foundations first. And when I got there, the Lord guided me to seek what I could believe in. He guided me through a process of renovation, which did require me to tear out some of the old ideas, but where ultimately I was building and making something stronger. In my next video, I would like to speak to those who are facing doubts and who are struggling, and hopefully provide a perspective that can be useful. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like and hit the subscribe button. Also, if you want more content, including the podcast, go to thoughtful-faith.com. Thanks for watching.